She wasn't even allowed to have a name. They forced her to eat from the ground like an animal. No one cared when she cried, and no one helped when she bled. Until one quiet human in an orange jacket walked in, looked around, and said just one word: "Stop." From that moment, everything changed. He didn't care about laws, species, or rules. He only cared that a little girl was hurting, and he would burn the galaxy before he let it happen again. This is the story of the girl they threw away, and the human who picked her up. Abe, Chilean Kahani Chaos Mod, Parjahan Saab Kutch Badal Gaya. In a quiet corner of a cold alien orphanage, a little girl sat alone. Her skin was pale green, her eyes wide and silver like the moon. She looked small, too small for her age. Her clothes were torn, and her knees were bruised. She never spoke, not even when others kicked her food or pushed her down. No one knew her name, because no one ever asked. They called her it, trash, or thing. She was not from a respected species. She was from a failed colony that most planets didn't even register anymore. She had no parents, no friends, and no rights. The other children mocked her because she never fought back. They forced her to eat from the ground. They laughed when she picked up crumbs with shaking fingers. No caretaker stopped them. To them, she was not worth protecting. She was invisible, like a shadow that no one noticed. But something different happened that day. Heavy boots echoed in the hallway. A tall human man walked into the orphanage, wearing a simple orange rescue jacket. He looked around slowly, his eyes scanning the children. His name was Jason Reed. He was part of a volunteer program from Earth called Human Care Course. His job was to help in troubled places. But nothing had prepared him for what he saw, there, in the middle of a noisy lunchroom. A tiny alien girl was being kicked. Her food had been thrown on the floor. The other children surrounded her. Laughing, yelling, calling her names, she knelt silently, trying to collect her food. But they kicked it again, sending pieces flying. Jason stopped, his face frozen. He had seen pain before, but not like this. This was cruelty with no reason, no guilt, no punishment. "Hey," Jason said, his voice firm. The children turned slowly, confused by the interruption. One boy smirked. "What? Human? You here to clean up our mess?" Jason didn't move. He walked toward the girl and knelt beside her. She didn't look up, her hands still reaching for crumbs. Jason picked up her plate, dusted it off gently, and placed the food back on it. Then he placed the plate in front of her and said, "You don't eat from the floor, not when I'm here." She froze, her hands stopping mid-air. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever knelt to her level. She slowly looked up, her silver eyes meeting his for the first time. Jason saw fear, confusion, and something else. A flicker of hope. It was buried deep, but it was there. One of the older bullies laughed and said, "She's not even real. She's a failed thing. Doesn't even have a name." Jason stood up, turned to the caretaker standing nearby, and asked, "What's her name?" The woman shrugged. "She doesn't have one. No record, no file. Just dumped here years ago." Jason looked down at the girl again and smiled softly. "Then let's give her one." He held out his hand and said, "My name is Jason, and I think I'll call you Luma. Is that okay?" The girl blinked slowly. Her lips trembled. She didn't speak, but she didn't pull away either. Jason didn't expect her to talk yet. He knew trust took time, but in that quiet moment, something invisible passed between them. A promise. He didn't know her story, and she didn't know his, but he had decided one thing. He would come back tomorrow, the next day, and the next, until the girl who had no name, no voice, and no future believed she was worth more, until she stood up, not just with her legs, but with her heart. As Jason turned to leave, he looked back and saw her watching him. She held the plate in her lap, untouched, but her fingers rested on it gently, not in fear this time. Jason smiled and walked out. He didn't need to say anything more. He just knew. This was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. Jason Reed returned the next day, just like he promised. He stepped into the same orphanage with the same orange jacket and the same calm face. But this time, the children whispered when they saw him. Some laughed, some rolled their eyes, but none of them touched Luma. She was sitting quietly in the corner again. Her tray untouched, her back against the wall. Her eyes flicked toward Jason. Unsure, she didn't smile, didn't wave, but she saw him, and for her, that meant something. Jason walked straight to her, carrying something in his hand. It was a small lunchbox from Earth, covered in star stickers. He placed it beside her and opened it slowly. Inside was warm food, real food, not dry ration cubes or gray protein paste. There were soft bread rolls, sliced fruit, and something that smelled sweet. Luma's nose twitched, but she didn't move. Jason didn't force her. He sat down beside her, cross-legged on the dirty floor, and began to eat from his own box. He didn't talk much, just sat there quietly, showing her he was not a threat. The other children watched, confused and annoyed. Why was this human sitting with her again? Jason turned to her and said gently, "I brought food for you, if you want it." Luma stared at him for a few seconds. Then, slowly, with shaking fingers, she picked up a small piece of bread. She brought it to her lips like it might explode. But when it touched her mouth, she blinked. It was soft and sweet. Her eyes widened just a little. Jason smiled, but said nothing. He let her eat in peace, one slow bite at a time. From that day, he kept coming. Every time he brought something, not just food. He brought small things from Earth. A soft blanket, a toy moon that glowed, a hairbrush with stars on it. And every time Luma got a little braver, she started sitting up straighter. She looked people in the eye, only Jason at first. Then others. She still didn't speak, but she began to draw. One day, Jason handed her a pad and pencil. She took it, hesitated, then began to scribble. Stars, planets, small figures. One looked like him, and one looked like her. They were holding hands, standing on Earth. Jason showed the drawing to the caretaker. "She's healing," he said. The caretaker shrugged. "She's still property of the Galactic Wards Registry," she said coldly. Jason frowned. "Property? She's a child. She's a failed prototype," the woman replied. "No name, no rights, no legal record." Jason's hands tightened into fists. "Then I'll register her myself," he said. "You can't," the woman snapped. Not without approval from the council, but Jason didn't care. That evening, he made a call to the Earth consulate. He explained Luma's situation. He asked about adoption laws across species. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready. She needed someone who cared, and he couldn't walk away now. Not after seeing her fight to trust again. Back at the orphanage, Luma waited near the door. She had never waited for anyone before. Now she did, every day, when Jason returned the next morning. She was already at the gate. She didn't say anything, but she held the little star toy in her hands. Jason knelt down and asked, "Do you want to go for a walk outside the center?" She looked around nervously. The other children were watching, some whispering rude things. But Luma looked back at Jason, and for the first time, she gave a small nod. They walked in silence through the outer gardens. It was dusty and dry, but there were patches of green. Luma bent down and touched a flower. Jason said, "It's called a fire bloom." She looked at him curiously. "Do you want to know what Earth flowers look like?" he asked. She nodded again, so he pulled out his datapad and showed her pictures. Roses, sunflowers, dandelions. She stared at them like they were magic. Later, when they returned, one of the boys sneered. "Look at her, walking with a human like she's special." Jason stopped and turned around. "She is special," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Luma looked up at him in shock. No one had ever said that about her before. That night, Luma sat alone in bed. She looked at the small blanket Jason gave her, and she did something she hadn't done in years. She smiled, just a little, and whispered to herself, Luma. Her name, the name he gave her, her first word in a long, long time. And no one heard it, but it was real. The next day, Jason came to the orphanage earlier than usual. He was holding a small box wrapped in shiny silver paper. Inside, it was something special. A sketchbook made of earth paper, and colored pencils from a human art store. He had noticed how Luma liked to draw, and he wanted to give her something that was truly hers. When he entered the lunchroom, he saw her sitting in the corner, waiting, not hiding, not scared, waiting. That alone made his heart feel warm. He walked to her, knelt beside her, and placed the wrapped box in her lap. Luma looked at it, then looked at him. She slowly peeled off the shiny paper, opened the box, and stared. Her little fingers touched the smooth paper, then the colorful pencils. No one had ever given her a gift before. Jason didn't rush her. He just said, "You can draw anything you want." Luma looked around nervously, afraid someone would snatch it from her hands. Jason gently said, "No one will take it. Not while I'm here." She clutched the sketchbook tightly to her chest, then turned her back to the room and began to draw. Jason sat nearby and watched. She didn't speak, but her silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of thought, full of colors, full of quiet bravery. Over the next few days, everything started to change. Luma began walking on her own. She ate at the table instead of the floor. She even nodded when the cook handed her food. That was a big moment, a sign of trust. The other kids noticed. Some were still mean, but most started ignoring her. Jason's presence had become a shield. They didn't want to mess with the human who kept showing up, especially one who looked strong and calm at the same time. One afternoon, Jason found her outside under a dry tree. She was sitting on a rock, drawing something in her book. He sat beside her and asked, "What are you making today?" She turned the page toward him slowly. It showed a picture of a small girl and a man in an orange jacket. They were flying through space, holding hands. Jason smiled. "That's me," he said, surprised. Luma gave a tiny nod, then looked down. Jason noticed a soft curve at the corner of her lips. "Wait," he whispered. "Was that a smile?" Luma looked up quickly, startled, and covered her mouth with her hand. Jason laughed softly. "Don't hide it. It's beautiful." It was small, barely there, but it was real. Her first smile in years. A tiny sign that the broken pieces inside her were starting to heal. Jason felt like he could cry, but he didn't. He just sat there and watched her draw another star. She was no longer a shadow. She was becoming someone. Later that week, Jason met with a local council advisor to ask about adoption. The answer was cold and final. "She's not registered," the advisor said, "which means she doesn't exist in the system." Jason tried to argue. "She's alive, she's smart, she's real." But the man just said, "She's not legally a person. She's a failed project." Jason stood up, furious. "She has a name now. Our name is Luma." The advisor sighed. Names don't change her status. Jason walked out without another word. But inside, he made a decision. He would fight for her, no matter what. Back at the orphanage, Luma waited again, holding her sketchbook, when she saw Jason return. She ran to him. It was the first time she had run in front of others. She didn't speak, but her eyes lit up when he knelt down. Jason took her hand and said softly, "We'll find a way." She didn't understand everything, but she squeezed his hand back. That was enough, that night. Luma drew a new picture. It showed a spaceship, 2 figures inside it, and stars all around. She titled it Home. It was the first time she ever believed she might have one. Jason was feeling hopeful. Luma was changing every day, smiling more, drawing more, even humming softly while sitting under the trees. It felt like she was finally safe. But danger was never far. And one morning, it came quietly. 3 alien officials in dark silver robes entered the orphanage. They carried metal pads and wore emblems of the Galactic Genetic Authority. Everyone went silent. Even the caretakers stood straight and nervous. Jason had just arrived when he saw them standing near the office. Luma hid behind the food counter, peeking through a crack in the wall. Her tiny hands were shaking. The lead officer, a tall being with orange eyes, asked, "Where is the subject?" Jason stepped forward. "What subject?" The officer glanced at his pad, then at Jason. "Genetic sample unit 73X, he replied coldly. Jason's heart dropped. "That's not a sample," he said firmly. "Her name is Luma." "She is not legally named," the officer replied. "She has failed property from a terminated program." Jason stepped in front of them. "She's not going anywhere," the second officer, a female with silver skin, spoke calmly. "She has no registered guardian, no legal ID, and no planet of citizenship." "She has me," Jason said, his voice rising. "I've been caring for her for weeks, which makes you a violator of species property laws." The officer snapped back. "You've interfered with galactic reclamation." Jason clenched his fists. "You're not taking her," he said again. But the officers had already filed the order. 3 days, they warned. In 3 days. "She'll be collected and transferred to an industrial assignment unit. She will not survive there," Jason said. "Not our concern," they replied. Walking out without looking back, Jason rushed to find Luma. She was hiding under the storage shelf, curled up in a ball. When he called her name, she crawled out slowly, tears in her eyes. He knelt and wrapped her in his arms. "They want to take you," he whispered, "but I won't let them." Luma didn't speak. She just pressed her face into his chest and held on tightly. Jason contacted the Earth consulate again. He explained the situation, begged for legal help. But Earth's reply came slow and cold due to alien jurisdiction. "We cannot interfere." Jason slammed his fist on the table. "They treat her like cargo," he shouted. But the message didn't change. Unless she is registered through official cross-species law, she cannot be protected. He didn't sleep that night. He stayed awake reading alien law files, looking for a loophole. But the more he read, the more helpless he felt. Every path led to the same answer. Luma had no legal right to exist. He watched her sleep, curled up with the sketchbook he gave her. She had drawn another picture. This one was of him carrying her through the stars, and written in shaky letters underneath was the word family. Jason's eyes burned. He couldn't let them take her. Not after all she had survived. Not after she finally started to believe she mattered. The next morning, Jason tried to register her as his ward under emergency protection. The alien system rejected it instantly. "Subject has no confirmed origin species," the form said. He tried a different approach, through a hidden network of human volunteers called Haven Chain. They help children like Luma escape illegal systems. He sent out a message. "Need extraction. 1 unregistered child, 3 days deadline." Then he waited, hoping someone would answer. On the second night, Luma sat beside him outside. She stared at the stars, her fingers drawing shapes in the dirt. "Do you want to go to Earth someday?" Jason asked softly. She nodded. Jason looked at her and said, "We'll find a way, I promise." But just before dawn on the 3rd day, Jason woke up and she was gone. Her blanket was cold, her sketchbook left behind. He searched every room, every hallway, every garden. The caretakers claimed they knew nothing, but Jason saw fresh footprints near the back exit. Tiny ones mixed with heavier alien boots. His chest tightened. She hadn't been taken, she had been stolen. And now she was in real danger. Jason's heart pounded as he ran down the orphanage hallway. Luma was gone, and no one was helping. He had already searched every room, every hallway, every hiding spot she ever used, but her sketchbook was still there, wide open on the bed. It showed a drawing of 2 hands trying to hold on. One big, one small, and beneath it, she had written one word in shaky English. "Sorry." Jason grabbed his datapad and hacked into the local port logs. He wasn't a professional hacker, but he had friends, and desperate men don't care about rules. It took him an hour to find it. A hidden manifest from the Galactic Genetic Authority. A group of reclaimed subjects had just been transferred to Dock Bay 9 for off-world transport. No names, just numbers, and one of them matched Luma's code 73X. Jason didn't wait. He threw on his rescue jacket, grabbed his stun baton, and ran straight toward the transport zone. The skyport was massive, buzzing with ships and travelers. No one noticed one human sprinting through the gates, but Jason's eyes were locked on the cargo sector. That's where they would take unregistered beings, not through the front, but like crates, like cargo. He reached Dock Bay 9 and spotted the carrier ship, dark, blocky, and marked with warning signs. Guards in black armor stood near the loading ramp. Jason ducked behind a metal container and scanned the area. He spotted the transport cages being wheeled up the ramp. Each one held a child, silent and sedated. His heart raced as he spotted her. Luma curled up, barely moving. Her hands were cuffed, her eyes half closed. Something in him snapped. He stood up and marched straight toward the ramp. "Stop," he shouted. The guards turned, surprised. Jason raised his ID. Human volunteer from Earth. "That girl is under my protection." The lead guard sneered. "She's not a girl. She's a rejected asset." Jason didn't argue. He swung the stun baton and hit the guard across the face. The man dropped instantly. The others charged, but Jason moved fast. He ducked, rolled, and knocked out the second one with a shock to the ribs. Luma looked up as the last guard raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a sharp roar filled the air. A cable dropped from above, from a ship floating just over the dock. Jason heard a voice through a hidden speaker. "Climb, now." He didn't question it. He broke the cage lock with a smash and pulled Luma into his arms. She was weak, but awake. He ran and grabbed the cable, holding her tightly as it lifted them off the dock. The guards below shouted, but it was too late. Jason and Luma disappeared into the sky. Inside the ship, they were pulled through the hatch. Jason collapsed on the floor, gasping. Luma clung to him, trembling but safe. The ship's pilot stepped into view, a human woman with a scar across her face. "You sent the Haven code," she said. Jason nodded, still out of breath. "I'm Marin," she added. "Welcome to the Haven chain." Luma looked up at Jason and whispered his name. He smiled and touched her forehead. "You're safe now," he whispered back. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't over. The GGA wouldn't give up that easily. They would hunt him now, not just for breaking the law, but for making a statement. That a human had chosen a forgotten alien girl over the rules of the galaxy. Luma sat in the co-pilot chair and stared out the window. The stars passed by slowly. She didn't say much, but she didn't have to. Her hand never let go of his, not even for a second. Jason knew they were running, but he also knew something had changed. For the first time, she was free, and for the first time, he wasn't alone either. The ship flew fast through unmarked space, far away from the trade lanes and security drones. Jason sat beside Luma, holding her hand gently. She had stopped shaking, but her eyes still held fear. Every time the engine made a loud noise, she flinched. Jason didn't speak much. He just stayed close, his warmth saying more than words ever could. The human pilot, Marin, sat at the controls. Flying with focus, she was older, tough-looking. With a scar running across her eyebrow, she didn't smile, but her voice was calm. "You're lucky we picked up your distress ping," she said. "Haven Chain doesn't answer every call anymore. Too many traps these days." Jason nodded. "Thank you for coming. She's one of us now," Marin replied, glancing at Luma. "We protect our own." The Haven Chain wasn't an official group. It was a secret network of humans who rescued forgotten alien children. Some were born in labs, some sold in black markets. Others, like Luma, simply abandoned and left to rot. The galaxy's laws didn't care about them, but the Haven Chain did. They didn't ask questions. They just saved who they could after hours of silent flight. They reached a hidden base. It wasn't a station or planet. It was an old mining asteroid, hollowed out and rebuilt. No lights blinked on the outside, no signals broadcasted from it. But as the ship approached, a secret hatch opened, and they slipped inside. Luma stared in awe. her hand tightening around Jason's. Inside, the place was filled with other rescued children. Humans and aliens, all living together. A young human doctor named Felix greeted them at the airlock. He had kind eyes and messy hair, and he bent down to Luma's level and smiled. "Welcome, little star," he said softly. Luma didn't reply. But she didn't hide either. That was progress. Felix looked at Jason. She need full scans. Food, sleep, maybe therapy. Jason nodded. Whatever she needs, they gave Luma her own room. Small, but warm. The bed had clean sheets, the walls were painted with stars, and there was even a drawer filled with art supplies. Luma looked around slowly, as if unsure it was real. Jason sat beside her and whispered, "No one will hurt you here." She picked up a crayon and drew a small heart on the wall. It was red, just like the one she drew in her sketchbook. Then she looked at Jason and gave the tiniest nod. He smiled back, knowing it meant, "Thank you," over the next few days. Luma changed again. She started exploring the halls with other kids. She painted pictures, helped fold blankets, and even laughed once. Just once. But it was real. Jason saw her eyes begin to shine again. She was becoming a child, not a subject, not a mistake, just a child, but peace never lasts. One morning, Marin rushed into the common room. Her face was tense. "Jason," she said sharply, "we've got a problem." He stood up instantly. "What is it?" "Gigi, I just put your face on a bounty list," she said, handing him a datapad. Jason stared at the screen. His picture was there, along with a price, but that wasn't what made his blood run cold. Next to it was Luma's code number, marked "Recover at all costs." "They know she's with me," he whispered. "They know she escaped." Marin nodded. "They're not just after you anymore. They want her back." Jason clenched his jaw. "Then we don't run," he said. "We fight." Felix stepped forward. "We have safe houses. We can move you both." But Jason shook his head. She can't live her life hiding forever. She deserves to go to school, make friends, feel sunlight. She deserves a name in the system. Marin looked at him and said, "Then we'll forge one." "What?" Jason asked, surprised. "We'll hack into the registration core." She said, "We'll give her a clean record. Earthborn, adopted. It's dangerous," Felix warned, "if we get caught." Jason didn't even blink. "I'd do anything for her," he said, that night. While Luma slept with her sketchbook in her arms, the team got to work. They pulled up system codes, forged documents, created a digital identity. Jason stood by, ready to sign anything in the new file. They wrote, "Name. Luma Reed species. Unknown human guardianship, origin. Earth ward of Jason Reed," when the final line appeared. Jason felt something shift inside him. He had no blood ties to her, but he had something stronger, love and choice. He looked at her sleeping and whispered, "You're mine now, and I'm yours." The next morning came quietly. A soft hum of machines echoed through the underground base. Jason woke up early and went to check on Luma. He found her asleep, curled under her blanket. Her sketchbook resting on her chest, on the open page. There was a drawing, a stick figure of Jason holding hands with a smaller figure labeled "Me." Underneath, in small, shaky letters, was the word "Home." Jason smiled gently and left her to sleep, but peace didn't last long. Marin burst into the control room minutes later. Her voice sharp and urgent. "We've been found," she said. Jason's heart dropped. "How?" "Unknown signal tagged us when we uploaded the forged ID," she said. "They tracked the signal back to our system node." "How much time do we have?" he asked. "Maybe 10 minutes," she replied. One bounty hunter ship already entered orbit. Jason didn't hesitate. He ran back to Luma's room, dropped to his knees, and whispered, "Luma, sweetheart, we have to go." She opened her eyes slowly, still groggy, but when she saw his face, the urgency, the fear, she sat up and grabbed her sketchbook. "Where?" she whispered. Jason lifted her gently and said, "Anywhere safe, as long as we're together." Alarms echoed through the base. People rushed through the halls, escorting children to escape pods and side tunnels. Marin handed Jason a small blaster. "You'll need this," she said. Then she knelt to Luma's level. "Be brave, little star," she whispered, "and stick close to him." Luma nodded, her lips trembling as they made their way toward the lower exit hatch. A heavy sound shook the base. Boom. The ceiling cracked and sparks flew from the walls. The bounty hunters had landed. Jason pushed Luma behind him and raised the blaster. A tall armored alien stepped through the smoke, eyes glowing red. "Give me the girl," the hunter growled. Jason didn't move. "She's not yours," he said. "She belongs to the council." The hunter snapped. "No," Jason replied. "She belongs to me." The hunter raised his weapon, but before he could fire, something unexpected happened. Luma stepped forward, standing in front of Jason. Her small hands were trembling, but her eyes were steady. "Leave us alone," she said loudly. The hunter laughed. "You think I'm scared of a child?" But suddenly, lights around the room flickered, and the control system sparked. The hunter turned in confusion. Luma had slipped a thin wire from her sketchbook and plugged it into the panel beside her. She had overridden the base's defense system. The floor under the hunter jolted, and a stun field lit up. He dropped to the ground with a groan, completely paralyzed. Jason stared at her, stunned. "Luma," he whispered, "how did you—" She turned to him slowly, walked up, and wrapped her arms around his waist. Then, softly, she whispered one word against his jacket. "Father." Jason froze. He had heard many things in his life, but nothing like that. His throat tightened, his eyes filled with tears. He dropped to his knees and hugged her tightly. "I'm here," he whispered, "and I'm never leaving you." The emergency transport took them far away from the asteroid base. Marin and the rest of the children escaped too. The Haven chain went underground again, hidden from scanners. But Jason and Luma had a new identity now. A father and daughter from Earth. They traveled to a quiet moon colony where no one asked questions. Jason built a small workshop, fixing ships and teaching others. Luma went to a real school. Her first ever. She made friends, learned to read faster, and even joined a drawing contest. She didn't win. But her piece was titled, "My First Smile." It showed a man in an orange rescue jacket kneeling beside a small alien girl with silver eyes. And behind them, a starry sky, wide and full of hope. Jason hung that drawing on their wall, right above their table. Every night, they ate together, laughed together, lived together. And every night before bed, Luma would whisper, "Good night, Father." And Jason would whisper back, "Good night, my daughter." Not by blood, but by love, not by law, but by choice. And that was more than enough.